3, 4.
I don't want to join this.
Okay, 4 o'clock, correct?
You can start.
Yep.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the special Board of Trustees for Wednesday, June 17th, 2020. Is there a motion to open this special meeting? Trustee Nell, second. Trustee Taylor, all in favor? Okay, the meeting is now open. I think Trustee Patino is not on yet. Is that correct?
I don't see him.
Okay, so we'll start. Just for a little general background, the purpose of today's meeting is to discuss efforts that can be made to encourage and support our businesses in Dobbs Ferry. We have obviously closed the street, Cedar and Main Street last weekend. We have another more of options that are available to us going forward, which I think we should discuss and consider. I think what we're considering tonight is to continue the street, whether we should continue the closings of Cedar and Main Street, whether we should do parklets, which we'll get into a description of what parklets are, and whether or not we should consider other avenues which may be helpful to the community, such as lateral sidewalks. We've already waived the cafe permit fees as a way to encourage and help support the businesses. So now we're looking at other avenues that we can do. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Alyssa so she can explain further what our options are. I know you've done a lot of investigation into this, and I think you're the most familiar with it. So I think you'll be in the best position to advise us as to what your investigation has shown so far. So take it away.
Okay, I'm just going to share screen and do a quick slide presentation that is slammed together, but these are all the things that have been discussed, and I'm just doing a quick overview to remind people about what the board is considering. So I'm just going to share my screen. And so the idea here is we want to extend our outdoor space in Dobbs. Why? Well, our current understanding of the virus is that transmission, the way the virus is transmitted is it means that being outside without a mask is safer than being inside without a mask. And also social distancing requirements are a real challenge in our downtown small spaces. So as we think about how to allow people to go back to eat out and shop safely, we are thinking about how can we provide more space to make it safer for their customers and our residents. So we have 4 programs that we're thinking about. We've already put the sidewalk cafe permit fee waiver into effect. We experimented on Saturday with the open streets. There's a parklets possibility, and then also this idea of extending sidewalk tables beyond the immediate establishment and further down the sidewalk, and we can talk about that. So just to give people an understanding, the sidewalk cafe permit waiver is in effect and it's not going away, but just to understand that it is a cost to the village. If there were, not everybody submitted their permits, but let's say there were 11 establishments, it would cost the village foregone cost of $16.50. For open streets, I don't know if many people came out on Saturday. It was a pilot program. We closed from Broadway down to down to Main on Cedar Street, and then from Cedar down to Oak. And then we left the block in front of the firehouse open to traffic. And then we closed from Elm down to Chestnut with an extension down on Chestnut. The parking restrictions went into effect at 3 p.m. to allow police officers enough time to clear the vehicles. And then streets were closed from 5 to 9 p.m. We asked restaurants who were putting out tables to leave a 12-foot space in the middle so that there was room for plenty of a pedestrian throughway, plenty of space. And if we needed to get emergency vehicles, there was space for that. And overall, it was not Ferry Festa. I don't know if anybody else got to see, but it was the street, while the tables were filled from what we could see, the streets were not crowded. And so there was plenty of space for people to walk around in a socially distanced way. And for the most part, people who were walking around were wearing masks. So just some pros and cons to think about. It does provide a lot of outdoor space for restaurants and allows them to keep their tables 6 feet apart. It provides mental health respite for our community after months of lockdown. People were reported being able to see friends and neighbors. It helped ease people back into the idea of coming out again after being locked down for 3 months. And it also provided outdoor space on a Saturday, which is a busy night for restaurants, which keeps fewer people, once we go into phase 3, from being inside. If we were to continue this beyond phase 3, even indoor space is still riskier than outdoor space. So the cons are obvious. 2, parking restrictions beginning at 3 was a challenge for a lot of regular retail, non-restaurant retail, if they were open past 3. It made takeout business for restaurants a challenge because people couldn't access close to the restaurants. For residents on Main and Cedar, there was an inconvenience in that they had to walk home. And then some residents expressed concern about encouraging any kind of gathering at this point, because we're still trying to contain this pandemic. And finally, it's a logistical challenge anytime you close the streets for emergency services, having to move fire trucks, et cetera. And I know our emergency services chief, Marin, and others can speak to that. Just to understand the cost, for us to close the streets, it's an overtime cost on a Saturday evening. So it's for the police, it's an estimated, $6,000, for the DPW, $2,000. So it's every time we do it on a Saturday evening, it'll cost us about $8,000 estimated. That was actually on June 13th, and because the experience was not Ferry Festa, and it was calmer and more contained, it would mean that we would not have to use quite as many personnel. We could use one fewer person from DPW and one fewer from the police force. So that it will be a little bit less expensive if we were to do it again. The parklets, I'm not going to go through all of this, but the idea has been implemented elsewhere, mostly to expand public space and beautify, but our purpose is quite different. Just to understand that, it would be for this emergency purpose of providing outdoor space while we're trying to contain this pandemic. Just to show what it looks like, you take a parking space and you put tables and chairs in the parking space, and that parking space is then walled off permanently for a season. So for instance, if we were to do this, we would implement it potentially on a monthly basis or a seasonal through end of September through end of October, depending on what the board wanted. Tampa is doing it, Hoboken's doing it. There are a number of other places, we're not the only ones. Just to understand these programs when they're implemented in other places, businesses have traditionally been totally responsible for construction and installation. That takes time. These are and is costly. The cost estimates for things like these platforms and the barriers, important safety barriers, it's anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000. And obviously we don't think that's reasonable. And it's also, it's not time efficient. So our solution would be that our village would provide safety barriers and a ramp for ADA access, as well as, we would paint the curb to delineate it. And then the restaurants would provide everything else within certain restrictions, in that they have to still put their tables 6 feet apart, and certain things would not be allowed. Some pros and cons of this program is that the semi-permanent nature in comparison with the street closures just means that it's a little bit easier logistically for some of our staff. And some of the cons are if we implement it, well, a pro is if we implement it, it's a little bit cheaper. It's not going to be $10,000 to $25,000. It would be, we have some costs, but it's not as time consuming or expensive. Jersey barriers, however, are probably what we would use, and they aren't pretty, but this is an emergency. These are just examples. I'm not saying that any of these restaurants actually want these, but if they were, let's say you take one parklet, it could probably fit about 2 tables, and we would have those 4 barriers in the ramp, and that's what this is kind of what the diagram, a sample diagram would be, and we would leave a space for our public works to access, to get the collect garbage, et cetera, clean up. So this is what it could potentially look like. These are the costs. So to the village, the barriers we'd have to buy and install, the ramp, the paint, the reflectors, foregone parking, if we want to consider that, and labor. Those are all the costs. So costs, you can see one space is $3,200. If we add up all the costs, 2 parking spaces about $5,500, 3 parking spaces is about $7,500. Another program, finally, is the lateral sidewalk extension. So again, that's putting tables farther along the sidewalk, not just in front of the establishment. And Lori Lee is going to be able to speak further to this in terms of the requirements, but it would mean, while it wouldn't cost us anything, we would need to require that the business come to an agreement with the neighboring business owners, and then they would then have to provide a letter signed by both parties and notarized, establishing the terms and the conditions. But again, Lori Lee can go into that further. And then just the only, I didn't make up a pros and cons table for this one, but the pro is obviously it's cost effective. A couple of cons is that not every business would be able to manage this. They might not have access because they have neighboring establishments it wouldn't work for. And also, there are probably some liability concerns that would need to be addressed. And then these are just resources, so that's it. I'll stop sharing my screen.
So Laura, can you speak more about the lateral parking?
Yes. I did attend a webinar yesterday with the New York State Bar Association section from local and municipal government attorneys. Mr. Beltrano from NICOM was a panelist as well. He suggested that if the extensions were going to exceed the parameters of the width of the restaurant or the local business, that there must be adequate assurance of a right of occupancy, similar to in the nature of a property right. And so that would mean that we would have to receive agreements, and I would recommend they be executed by both parties. Agreements from the property owner, the tenant, depending on the scenario that we're talking about. So if it's say it's a residential home next to a business owner who is a tenant, then just having the signatures of the property owner, the tenant, and the residential property owner on a solo document would be sufficient to prove that there's a right of occupancy, a property right, as it were. So we could provide templates depending on the scenario. So we get the same level of information from all of the arrangements as they're being made. And that was the extent of the input I wanted to talk about. In some cases, that lateral expansion assists because obviously a sidewalk cafe now is limited with the 6 feet. So in some cases you can only get 2 tables. And if you were to take the next storefront, the front of the next storefront, say it's a business that isn't open past 4 o'clock or closes at 6, or, I mean, you could make the arrangements to have 4 tables, or in some cases 5 tables, depending on what that looks like. You wouldn't need to further comply with the ADA. They would need to comply with the state licensing authority, the business, if they're serving alcohol. They would need to expand the premises to include this other property. And the SLA would need proof that they have the right to occupy that space as well.
Okay,
So that's
thank
what
you.
we-
Just restaurants, or would it have to be offered to other businesses as well?
I was envisioning, since you're, for purposes of public safety, you're trying to expand the use of the public space. I was envisioning that you would want to be offering this to all the businesses, depending on their needs. I mean, I don't know the particular arrangements, but some of the retail businesses may be small enough that only one customer can be in. And if they were going to have materials, you know, this would increase the likelihood of more customers being able to shop and to patronize the business at once.
Thank you both for your presentations. I appreciate it. Do any of the trustees have any other specific questions at this time?
Elisa or Chief, if the street closures started later, would that also impact the cost of the staff that we'd be hiring to do it? Anyone? Charlene,
That's a-
Chief here? Oh, you're muted.
I don't know where he is now.
All right, well, that's a question when we see him again. 'Cause-
So we have to,
if-
we have to assume that 1 hour later would definitely be less cost.
Right, okay.
But then would we have to extend 1 hour longer or not?
I don't think so,
Wouldn't
because it
matter.
seems it only took them 40
I-
minutes to close the street. So if we were having dining from 5 to 9.
I would not,
street closure 4 to 10.
I would ask the chief, and I'll see where he is, whether, okay, he just said he got frozen. So we can hold that question till he unfreezes.
There he is.
Unfrozen. Christie, had a question as to whether it would increase the cost if we change the hours. Let's say that you started, what was it, 4 or 5?
Well, we started the people at 3 this last time, but if we started at 4 or 5, like basically if there were less hours, it would cost 1 hour less for everybody, correct?
Correct.
There's no, I thought there were in some of the contracts, and maybe I'm thinking of the DPW contract.
It's DPW.
It's DPW that has minimum
Yeah.
hours for overtime. Okay.
We do have minimum hours as well. But based off of the length of this, I don't know that, you know, we would trigger that. But certainly the less the length of time, yes, the less of the cost.
But Rick, can you do the work with an hour less? I mean, that's really the question.
When it works, it works. I would prefer to have more time to get the streets clear so that we can ensure that it's clear and safe. So that as the businesses start putting their tables out, there are not cars still operating in the secure zone. That would be my concern.
We had 2 hours that we gave this past weekend. Could we cut it down to an hour or an hour and a half if we did it again?
We could try that. It just, when there's an issue, when we can't get in touch with a vehicle owner, or there's multiple vehicles that are still remaining in the street, then it becomes problematic, especially if you have to remove vehicles. We're limited in our towing capacity. So that's where an hour and a half to an hour becomes a very small window for us to secure the streets.
Okay. And then the only other thing I wanted to point out from Elisa's presentation was for parklets, one of the cons that we would have to deal with is that the parklets are taking away parking. And so that's reducing the amount of parking available for residents and shoppers and whoever on Cedar and Main, wherever those spots are.
Yeah, and they're
I know
permanent.
she had that thought in her head. It just wasn't on the chart. So.
Yeah, and I think Chief Marin should speak to it also, his concerns, just so that everybody knows them. Chief?
Yes, my concern about the parklets was the narrowness of the street as they exist now. You might be narrowing them down even further. And depending on the traffic impact, could delay getting to the firehouse for our members and getting to the scene. So it could cause a problem, just so that you're aware of it. I mean, it could cause a delay.
Is that only, Chief, if we close the part in front of the firehouse? If we keep the firehouse open, is that still an issue?
No, I'm not referring to closing the street. I'm only talking on the parklets. If you put the parklets out, it narrows the street. It has nothing to do with the closing of the street. It worked fine the other day. It's not an issue, depending on if the crowds get any bigger. But the parklets, again, a car doesn't take up an entire parking space now. There's a few inches that gives us a little leeway. If you put that barrier all the way out to the end of a parking space, it's going to narrow the street down. If you have parklets on both sides of the street, I'm concerned that traffic is not going to be able to pass one another. I'm not going to get a truck, or if somebody double parks, or if somebody breaks down, it's just going to cause a tremendous delay. But we'll do whatever you want to do. That's, but that's from a public safety, I have to bring that concern up.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board at this time?
Okay, I guess, yeah, I mean, a couple things from a question and a comment. Do we think that we could start, if we could start later and compress the time that it takes to get this underway, it would really, I think, help the businesses that did have difficulty on Saturday. And I think what day we do it is also something to think about. There were some suggestions by email from business owners that Sunday would be a better day for business owners to do this than Saturday, where there's more kind of traditional commerce. I also think if it's legally feasible, that there's no reason at all not to encourage the restaurants who could expand on the sidewalks around them to do that, because it doesn't cost anything, and it doesn't impede traffic.
And I didn't say this, but we could provide a template letter for businesses to make them easier for them to understand the kind of conditions they might have to include.
Or the lateral expansion.
Yeah.
Can we add one quick question regarding the Sunday thing? Is overtime more expensive on Sundays?
Steve?
Overtime
What
gets
was that? I didn't hear it.
holidays.
Is overtime more expensive on Sunday?
No.
No, unless it's a holiday. But
On holidays.
holiday.
Oh, okay.
One thing, Chief, we do without the sanitation trucks?
I would prefer a larger style vehicle Does not necessarily need to be the sanitation, but I would, for the main intersections of Broadway and Cedar and Main and Chestnut, those would lend to a larger vehicle that DPW would be able to provide. We're able to use their smaller trucks for the other intersections that we're controlling.
Okay.
Can I ask, why is this falling into overtime? Why is considered overtime?
Because this is a unique detail that falls beyond the pale of normal patrol. And as we're getting into the summer months with the officers, like case in point for this past Saturday, I had 2 officers on patrol. So they're unable to assist in the detail at all. So for something of this nature, for the amount of hours, it becomes an overtime issue for us to make sure that the posts are picked up. And with the intersections, I do, for safety purposes, I want an officer at least each one of the intersections, as people still will drive around the truck, a police car, and a barricade. And so that we can ensure that the guests that are enjoying their dinner stay safe and that roadway stays clear. That's the issue with the officers.
Thanks, Chief.
Any other questions from the board?
And the parklets have to be permanent, right? Like if we agree to do them and businesses want them, they can't just be for the weekends, right?
No, it's too much work involved.
So it's 24/7 essentially, those spaces are gone.
Yeah.
And it's feasible. Like one of my concerns with the parklets is that it's feasible that, you know, a lot of different businesses, not just restaurants like nail salons or hair salons or retail stores, would want the parklets too. And so now we can end up in a place where we have, you know, half or more of our parking spaces in the downtown gone.
Yes.
And restaurants might not even be using them, but for in the evening. So that's one of my concerns. And I also am concerned that I think we have a really nice downtown and it's a really quaint village, which is something that gets talked about all the time. And the proposed parklets are not very attractive. They look more like a construction site. I know that it's, you know, last minute and we're trying to help everyone and all those things, but I mean, that's a concern too.
Yeah, that's an important question. I was just wondering if we looked into a cost for a more attractive parklet typology. So we looked at what was available quickly and sort of cost effectively. That's the Jersey barrier, the water-filled Jersey barrier. But I wonder what, just if anyone knows, Lisa, maybe you've looked into this, and I could probably look into it also, but if there's a approximate cost per space of heavy duty attractive planters or other types of systems that are utilized for this for the protection of the
Trustee Patino, there's a few problems with that. One of them is that we just can't subsidize some businesses as opposed to others. With the barricades,
I understand all those other issues. I'm just curious about the cost of doing it the right way, because my concern is about doing it the wrong way in an unattractive way, that what Nicole just brought up. I realize there are a host of other issues that pertain to this, and I'm just asking about this one particular dollar related one.
So you just want the cost of it regardless of whether we can do it or
Yeah, I think
not.
if we're debating whether or not this is a valuable thing, one important component of it is what will be the effect on the appearance of Main and Cedar Street. And if it's going to detract, which I believe the Jersey barriers will tremendously, it's going to look like a construction site, then I think that's a major problem. If we have a lot of people pushing for this and they really want to do it the right way, I think we should analyze what the cost is to do it in the right way. And that's really what I'm getting.
But what Charlene's trying to say is that the village can't purchase planters to put there. We could purchase things that we can use for safety protection, like barriers, concrete barriers, different kinds of barriers potentially. But if it was planters and doing it right, like they do in other cities, that would be on the owner like they could then rent a spot from us that's empty and build it up themselves, but then the cost is all on them to build the attractive version that we aren't providing them.
So
right?
then, so if I understand this correctly, there's only one option, and it is the permanent or semi-permanent ugly option.
At this point, unless,
Okay,
unless,
that's a legit. If that's what there is, then that's what we're talking about. That's okay.
But there's other barriers besides the plastic water-filled ones. There's like the cement ones they have in Larchmont that look different, potentially more industrial. I don't know, like, depending on what your
It's
what
funny.
tax level is. But I mean, the ones that we have in this document are like, plastic budget water-filled ones. So,
And I'm not critiquing this exercise. I didn't mean to take it down that route. I just, I want to point out that what they're typically used for is to like conceal, is to block off a section of street so you can put a garbage truck and pick up the waste, and then, for construction site. And I hate to see that as what
kind of like face masks are typically used to do surgeries in a hospital. Alas.
And just to say, we did consider whether to put the burden on the businesses to install these things. And given the time frame and the cost, we thought it would be more cost effective and easier to implement and less costly of our staff resources to inspect and go back and forth. And we knew that this had to happen quickly. And that was one of the considerations as well.
Did you guys, are there other options besides the plastic barriers? Back to that. Are the cement ones potentially available?
I didn't look into that option. The only problem is, I don't know if we have a truck that can lift them or even drive them down it.
yeah.
Cement Jersey barriers require, a heavy
Flatbed.
equipment to move around.
We got the forklift, but we don't have the flatbed.
Plus side to the plastic barriers is that they can be emptied easily at the end of the season and possibly moved. While if we do something that's more construction, more permanent, then they're there all year.
And where we're going to store them, and we really can't use them for anything else.
Just one thought that, and we may or may not make a difference to people, but presumably during times when people were dining there, the restaurants would do things to kind of spruce them up, like hanging a tablecloth, for example, over them, or putting potted plants on top, or do things just to make the space nicer. That wouldn't help in non-restaurant hours, but as far as creating a dining experience, I'm pretty confident that our restaurants would find a way to make it nicer than as if you were sitting in a construction site.
Well, that only goes for the interior. You can't put it on the outside because then you'd be impeding traffic or parking for the other spaces, or it's not going to help the appearance from outside of the parklet.
Well, whether it would or whether a tablecloth could hang on both sides or not, it won't help for the whatever it is, 18 hours a day when they're not serving, because they wouldn't remain decorated probably during that period.
Okay, what I'd like to do is open it up to the public. I know we've gotten many emails from different residents. My goal is to have this meeting end at 5 o'clock. So for those who want to speak, I'm asking you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. Very quickly, if you are participating either by Zoom or by phone or video, you can raise your hand and we will call on the residents in the order in which they raise their hand. In order to raise your hand, you should click on the icon labeled participants, and a column appears on the right-hand side. At the bottom of that window is the raise your hand button. For people calling in by phone, you can push *9 in order to raise your hand. We will let you know it is your turn by calling either your name or your phone number. Please identify your name, your address, and the business, if you are representing a business, the business you represent. And I'm opening it up now. And I guess, Jen, are you the referee tonight?
Yes. I see one person with their hand up. Melissa, can you hear us? Melissa? Melissa?
He says that she's been muted.
Unmute me.
She's not
Unmuted.
muted. Hold on one second. Melissa, you have to unmute yourself.
I did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, the second time was a charm, I think. Okay, thanks. Thanks for hearing me out. I'll try to be brief. My name is Melissa LaPrette. I own the business At Land on Main and Chestnut. And essentially, I've already expressed what this meant to us, to the board. So I think you're all really aware of how this impacted us. The early closure was really bad for us and would continue to be detrimental if it continued to happen. For me, I just think it's super important to note that this solution really isn't for retail, and no matter how big or small the retail space, we need our facility and we need our space to actually function, and our merchandise needs our space and needs our displays to be shoppable. We also need our spaces to be able to comply with CDC and state requirements. We cannot do that in the streets. So if you're considering these options for anyone except for restaurants, they're really not viable or feasible, and that's totally fine. It's completely okay. And I think we need to support our restaurants, and I have zero problem doing that. But I think the most important thing to understand is the minute that the street closes, it impacts every other business that isn't a restaurant. It impacts every business that relies on their customers needing access to them. So, the laundromat, myself, the nail salons, the hair salons, the lash salons, anyone that truly needs access. So, speaking about an hour later, 4 o'clock on a Saturday is where we make the majority of our revenue. It's right in that time. So for us, this could cost us an incredible amount of money if we lose Saturday accessibility. And we would. I'm not making this up. Every time the street closes, our business drops between 50 to 70%. And I've been paying really close attention to all of the street fairs and everything that's gone on. And while I understand this is a different type of event, it's still a reality for retail. So what I would ask is the board consider it seems like this is going in the direction of street closures. If that's the case, really 5 o'clock would need to be the minimum amount of time. I can sacrifice my last 2 hours open if need be, because we're planning on going back up to our usual hours, hopefully by phase 3. I also spoke to some restaurants, including, Cookery Parlor, and they felt comfortable. And I don't want to speak for all restaurants, but I know that they felt comfortable, and I know a few other restaurants felt comfortable with starting the dining at 6. I understand, Chief, that you're saying you need a lot of time, but every single time the street closes, everything is perfect in 40 minutes, always, for every single event I've ever seen. So if there's any way to start it at 5, that would help us. It's not going to be great, but it's a compromise that, at least as a business owner, I'm willing to make. Otherwise, I feel that, the parklets are a great idea, but I see it seems logistically complicated. I think we need to really focus on fixing the kind of core parking issues in our village of, residents overwhelming the commercial spaces, the meters not being enforced, employee parking, which takes up valuable street parking. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can make improvements in the village to make parking more accessible. And I just ask that the board truly consider the impact to all the other businesses that really this wouldn't benefit. And it's just not for us, and that's fine again, but it's just not, it's not the right thing. So that's my opinion on this.
Melissa, how would Sunday affect you?
Sunday would be immensely better, so much better. Saturday is a really important day for a lot of retail and also service-based businesses like hair salons, because it's the day that people are out running errands and they're off. And, you know, we see it's our busiest day of the week. There are weeks where that day makes our entire week of numbers, sometimes our entire month. So for us, it's so essential. So if this were to be Sunday, and if the street closures were to maybe start at 5 o'clock on Sunday, that would be good for us. You know, I'll just speak for us, because I know there were a lot of other businesses that I spoke to personally that were very concerned about the street closures. So, you know, we would need to make sure that they also believe, you know, that Sunday is better. But I think in general, Sunday is just a much better day of the week. Again, as long as it's not cutting into the middle of our days, you know, where we need our customers to access us, and they haven't been able to do that in 3 months.
Okay. I'm just interested on all the other restaurants that are out there, if they would just give us, you know, if you have any comments about Saturday versus Sunday or an hour earlier. Now's your time. Now's your chance.
I have two people, but I know the Rare Buds a restaurant, but I don't know if Kathy C is
Yeah.
She is.
retail.
No,
Okay.
she's a restaurant.
Oh, she's a restaurant? Okay, I'm gonna make Kathy C.
She's two restaurants.
Hey guys, can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Hi everyone, this is Kathy and David from the Cookery and the Parlor. First of all, thank you guys all so much for creating this forum to get everybody's feedback and opinion. First and foremost, we just want to say that, like, whatever we move forward with, we even as restaurants feel very strongly that it has to work for all merchants, not just restaurants, but all merchants. And in talking to the different business owners that we've talked to so far, it just feels like there is a way to do that. And I feel like that's what you guys are trying to get to. And we just want to say thank you and we appreciate it. I'm speaking on behalf of obviously the Cookery and the Parlor, but also I have talked to a few other restaurants and I know they agree. We would much, much rather have limited, expanded outdoor dining directly in front of our restaurants on a regular basis, be it through August, September, October, whatever it is. Let's just call it throughout the summer, versus a once a week street closure. We love the idea of the street closure. You know, maybe we shift that to like a once a month, first Friday, first Saturday, first Sunday, whatever it may be. But I really think, like, if we want to save restaurants, and that's what we're talking about here, we really would prefer the, you know, one or two, let's call it 2 parking spaces in front of each restaurant. Yes, the barricades might not be the prettiest thing, but you can absolutely count on every single restaurant to do their part to make them beautiful with greenery and shrubs. And I think that, you know, sort of that temporary look of those concrete barriers, that I would rather look at that than a lot of empty storefronts in the village. And that's really what we're facing. So, you know, we'll beautify them. I know every restaurant would probably be committed, you know, to doing that. So I just wanted to point that out. The other thing is having those spaces, let's say 2 spaces on a regular basis, what that does for the village and how that benefits the village and other merchants is that on a regular continual basis, we will be bringing you know, customers into the village, and you know, that hopefully will visit other merchants, and we can come up with ways to encourage that as sort of a bigger community effort. And Melissa and I have talked about that, and we have some really great ways, you know, that we're thinking about to do that if we were to move forward with that. The other thing we could do to sort of make up the parking that you're losing, so we're losing those 2 parking spaces per restaurant, and obviously that's a challenge. But what we could possibly do to make up for that, again, another idea Melissa and I spoke about earlier today, is to use the Palisade Street parking lot to maybe create a new employee sticker, and I mean employee of small businesses, parking sticker for myself, David, every other business owner, whether it's a restaurant or not, as well as their employees, to use Palisades parking So we're taking our cars off the street. And I know that we would be committed, if we got those 2 spaces, to be committed to, parking elsewhere, off street, let's call it. But the Palisades parking and a special sticker for employees of local merchants might be one way to do that. But again, I just want to reinforce, our vote is for the 2 parking spaces in front of the restaurants versus a full street closure.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm gonna put the rare bit on. Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
That's Scott Broccoli, own the Rare Bit over on Cedar Street. Yeah, to echo what Kathy mentioned, thank you guys for everything you're doing. Much appreciated. And Kathy pretty much nailed it in terms of what I wanted to say. And speaking to other restaurant owners, 1 or 2 days a week doesn't do it for us. It's great. It's helpful, but it's not. It's really it's a drop in the ocean compared to being able to be open 6 or 7 days a week and having those permanent spaces out there. I mean, just think if we have 2 Saturday or 2 Sundays in a row where it rains and we can't put this on, there goes 50% of our business for the month. And the other part is, I spoke to the mayor about this when he stopped by Saturday night. So just bringing people back to work. I can't get people to come back to work for 1 or 2 days. I can get them to come back for 5, because then, there's a possibility they'll beat unemployment. But coming back for 2 days a week, they're going to tell me to take a hike, and you can't beat that, because they're getting a ton of money from the government right now to do nothing. So I think in the interest of creating jobs, bringing revenue back to the town, the parklets are the best way to go. It seems like they're a lot more cost effective given all the overtime that would be incurred on any given day. $8,000 a day, that's a huge number when you balance out what the parklets would do. And again, to echo what Kathy mentioned in terms of doing everything we possibly can to beautify those. We can do it inside and out. I just thought about something that would work. All the vinyl wraps that are being used today on cars and buses and stuff like that. That's probably the direction I would go. Just to, again, make it look pretty, make it look inviting, because the Jersey barriers are not pretty or inviting, but, I would want to do something to not only make my business pretty and inviting, but also the town. No one wants to see those things unnecessarily. But yeah, before I go on and on, the parklets for the restaurants are the way to go. And it seems like that'll have less of an effect on the other merchants in town that don't want to see the streets closed. So I know a lot of the merchants don't want to see the street closed because that, somebody like Readers, that crushes them, when the street closure happens. That's very tough for them. Some other places that rely on delivery and not so much foot traffic, we couldn't get deliveries out. We had to go to Stop and Shop to meet people for takeout and delivery. Whereas we had the parklets, that wouldn't hurt as much as the closures. So thanks again. Appreciate everyone being here and taking the time.
Well, Scott, maybe you and Kathy can talk to the fact that obviously this will cost us money. It's a big outlay of money. And I'm not going to ask you to say how much money, but I just want you guys, your feeling or input as to some sort of a rental fee that you'd be willing to pay to reimburse the village for the outlay that we incur. So it would be maybe on a monthly basis where you would, for 3 months or so, pay us a monthly fee per spot. And I just want you to, if you and Kathy could speak to that, that would be great.
Am I still on?
You are.
Okay. When I first heard the number of 2,500 being tossed around, I just did the quick math. It's $21 a day when you go per spot through October 31st, which again, that was the date that I was told in the beginning, $20 a day. If you can't commit to $20 a day, you're in the wrong business. Go home. That's just the math that I did. It does not seem like a defensive number at all. I think it's fair. I don't think the town nor the taxpayer should have to subsidize us. I am a taxpayer as well. I live here, so I see both sides of that. and 20 bucks a day. So for me, it would be 60 bucks a day to have 3 spots. I've got no problem with that. Would I like it to be less? Of course I would. You know, there's no question about it. But when I heard that number, I really did it on the surface, me to spend $7,500. Yeah, it's a big number. But when you extrapolate it out to October 31st through Halloween, it's not bad at all. So looking at the big picture, I'm fine with anything, especially with that being the ceiling. Like I said, I'm okay with the ceiling, let alone, charge me less. I'm cool with that too.
Okay, well, you said it's the ceiling, we didn't, but
Fair.
could Kathy comment on it? Is she still around?
Yes, hold on one second. Kathy, I just put you on.
Hey, guys. So I disagree. I feel that restaurants have been gutted. I don't know what Scott's math is based on, if it's 7 days a week, 5 days a week, 4 days a week. It's different for every restaurant. So if that works for him, that's fine. I think I'd like to hear from the other restaurants on the call. But we really feel strongly that there shouldn't be a fee. We know it's an investment, but what we're talking about is saving restaurants who, like I said, are essentially losing money every day. And, if it wasn't for the PPP, many restaurants that are on the call, including some of ours, would be closed. So it really depends on how many days you're operating and how long, like if it is going, I've heard maybe just till the end of August. I've also heard till the end of September. There's also factors like weather where, you don't know whether it's too cold, it's raining, it's not just simple math. And I think just thinking about a $2,500 investment, how much that means to a restaurant right now is so significant. So I would really ask, like, if they're, again, the federal government, the state government, they've all come to sort of the rescue of small businesses in the ways that they can. And we would ask the same of the village. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying you guys can do it, but I know from speaking to other restaurants that that's a big nut and it's really not even doable. So I would love to hear, I know there's some other restaurants on the call. I don't know if anyone else has raised their hand, but if they had, I would love for them to weigh in. There are many other villages that are not charging fees. And again, I can't say that my information is 1,000% correct, but from what I've heard, Largemont isn't charging fees. Rye is not charging fees. We need support right now. We are limping along. And again, many restaurants are open right now just because of the PPP, which we all don't know what's going to happen in the fall. We need to stretch those dollars as long as possible. So it's not, I don't think it's, there could be a resurgence, and we need, like, again, that, we have to count on that to keep our businesses open. Like I said, I'd like to hear from the other restaurants if there's anyone else who's raised their hand.
Okay. Has anybody else raised their hand, Jen?
Yeah, we have a couple. I'm gonna put on Nicholas Campbell. Nicholas, can you hear us?
Looks like he's on mute.
Can you guys hear me?
Now we can.
Yes.
All right, sorry about that. How are you? Nick Campbell, President, Rivertown Chamber of Commerce. I just want to start by saying, this is awesome that the village is doing this, because through this whole pandemic, obviously you have a lot of our members that aren't going to come out of it. And you even have some, non-members that aren't going to come out of it. So for us, we're pro all business, whether it's restaurants, coffee shops, dry cleaners, Melissa's store, Atlan, whatever it may be. I was always under the impression that closing down the street was more so people could get out and window shop. I mean, obviously you have to be 6 feet apart with the tables and whatnot, so people can sit and eat with, safely. But I would think that closing the street down would allow more folks to get out and safely walk around and drive more traffic. So given that it's a pilot, and as you always try and get results from a pilot program, I'd be curious to see what the real loss numbers are from last week and this week, from the 3 to 5 hours for the retailers that are saying that they are losing business. And then the other thing too is I completely agree with Kathy and Scott in regard to the parklets and setting it up so you could actually have people come in every day of the week versus just one night a week. But I also agree with Kathy that I think $2,500 is way too much of an investment right now for these businesses that are just trying to get reopened. I'm on the county executive's task force for the reopening, and just like Kathy said, you have many villages on the Sound like Larchmont, Mamaroneck that are very similar to Dobbs Ferry that are not charging a fee whatsoever. However, I do kind of agree with Scott where if you break it down by day, let's see what that fee costs per business. But you can't just have a blanket statement and say that $2,500 works for me or him or Kathy, because it might work for one of us and not the other one. So I just wanted to weigh in with those few points.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, I'm gonna put Corey on next. Corey, can you hear us? Corey? Corey, can you unmute yourself? Should I go to the next one?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I'll try Corey again later. Jess?
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, this is Jessica Galen. I'm the chair of the Downtown Committee. Thanks all for all the effort that you put into this whole project and into supporting initiatives to help continue to improve our downtown. I just wanted to say that I personally was really excited about the sort of the interest in trying something new. I think it's a really exciting approach for Dobbs to be taking to just kind of try something, and want to applaud that effort. And, I completely defer to the business owners who have spoken here really eloquently about their needs and how this affects them. I look to, the feedback from, Melissa from Atland about, making sure that we're really cognizant about not causing unintended harm to non-restaurants by doing something that really is in great service of the food businesses. And then also what Kathy and Scott were saying about how we can support restaurants more effectively. I think there are a lot of great ideas that have been raised. I've taken some time over the last week to speak to a number of business owners in the downtown, and folks were definitely raising a lot of ideas like, could we do this on a different day? Could we do it, less frequently? I think there is a lot of interest in doing whatever we can to make sure this works for everyone, including the businesses and the residents who deeply care for the downtown. I also wanted to, if any of the committees listening in, volunteer our committee to help with getting the word out and celebrating any of these new initiatives that come out in support of businesses, while we also try to make sure that we're hearing everyone. And so whatever our committee can do to help, I mean, this is the reason folks move here. So definitely want to contribute however we can.
Thank you, Jess. I think Corey is now unmuted. So was Corey available?
Yes, she raised her hand. I'm gonna put her back up.
Hi, can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I'm Corey Warshall. I'm here on behalf of Pico La Trattoria. Sergio was having difficulty getting into the call. I know this is a frustrating time for everyone, and we're grateful that the town is really looking for a solution for all of the businesses. We want to make sure that Dobbs Ferry continues to be a destination. And we agree with Kathy and Scott with respect to the parklets. I know that ideally a beautiful solution would be what we would all want, but this is an emergency. We need to figure out something that's going to work now. And as Kathy said, we certainly would do our part to ensure that whatever solution for a parklet we could come up with, we would make as beautiful as possible. We want our place to look great. We want the town to look great. We want people to be attracted to Dobbs Ferry and come and spend their money here, visit the other stores. With respect to a potential fee of $2,500 per spot, I mean, that's just not feasible. We are treading water here. We're trying to keep the business open. We want to make sure our employees have jobs, often at our own expense. And there's really no way we would be able to come up with a fee like that, and we don't want to see businesses go out of business. We don't want to see the restaurant shuttered. That would do tremendous harm to, the vibrant downtown scene that we currently have. And but we are grateful that you're working so hard to come up with a solution for everyone. So we're on board for the parklet.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna put Shari Asher on.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Shari Rosen Asher. I've lived in Dobbs Ferry for 23 years. I am also the community liaison for George Latimer to all of the chambers of commerce and the small business community in the county. So I'm wearing two hats right now as someone who went to Harper's on Saturday night and had a fabulous dinner and really enjoyed seeing all my friends and neighbors that I haven't seen in 3 months. I thank you so much for that initiative. It was great to get out of the house and feel safe. As the community liaison for the county executive, one of the projects I've been working on is this exact thing, is taking a look at what all the municipalities are doing with regards to outdoor dining, and working on a project for our director of operations, Joan McDonald, on it. I'm also part of the reopening task force and part of the Office of Economic Development. And Nick is right. Almost no municipalities in the entire county are charging fees right now. They have all waived their permit fees, and they're all working to with the restaurants and the other business owners to try to utilize the space in the best way possible, so that it would encourage people to come out and come into town, because part of what everybody's dealing with is consumer confidence about feeling safe. So just because stores open or restaurants open doesn't mean people are going to come. They need to feel like they're safe, and so people will feel safer out of doors. There are a lot. I just came from Larchmont, where the county executive had his 2 o'clock briefing. They have had for the last 8 days al fresco Larchmont, where they worked with the police department, the fire department, the mayor, the chamber of commerce to set up barriers. It does not block traffic. It just blocks off certain, areas of traffic, and a few spots in front of the restaurants with these barriers that people have also decorated with planters and things like that. And they're going to be getting some covers for them to make it more attractive. But it allows the restaurants to put tables outside their spot that will extend, a little bit into the street, but not block off traffic and not be unsafe because there's these concrete barriers. Some towns are allowing parking lots to be used as outdoor dining, where if it's a parking lot that is close to several restaurants, they could almost do it as a takeout or a dine out kind of area. So people could go to the restaurants, pick up their food, but then go eat it, let's say in that parking lot at the end of Cedar, to set that up as a picnic area, kind of, if you will. Some towns are doing it on a case-by-case basis. There are some that restaurants that are requesting to use space before. There are some that are using their parking spots. There's a lot of different ways to do this. I think that the Sunday idea is something that wouldn't interfere with other businesses, but also as a consumer, the idea that I could walk down the street and not have to worry about traffic, would make me want to go look into other stores or look into windows. We're not at the point yet where all the retailers are totally open. You still have to kind of make appointments and just go in and pick up. So this situation is ever changing, but I would encourage our town to take a look at what other towns are doing. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Larchmont's been doing this for a while, but almost every town has agreed to close one street or the other at certain points, or take over parking spots to put tables in. We have a very walkable town, and we have parking that's available that people don't take advantage of. And we have a shuttle that goes to the train station, so we could use the shuttle to pick people up to take them to town. We could shift the hours so that it's 6 to 10 instead of 5 to 9, and maybe you wait a little longer to close the street down. But if I'm happy to share some of the information that I have, but I also would encourage everyone to go on a field trip to look at what other towns are doing and see what would work. Thank you.
Sherry, we've reached out to Larchmont a few times and we haven't gotten a response, but.
No, I just was with the mayor, so I could do that for you. I'll hook you up with the mayor.
That'll be great. And aside from Larchmont, do you know of any other villages that are doing the parklets for free?
If there's nobody, I have a whole spreadsheet in front of me, and there's nobody that's charging any permit fees to restaurants.
Well, we're not charging any permit fees either. Are there anybody, we're waiving the cafe permit fees. We've done that. But is there anybody else who's doing the parklets?
No. I mean, if there is, I haven't seen it yet. Most of them have kind of sacrificed that for the good of getting people to come in and to come to the businesses and stuff. So I haven't seen anything. I mean, I'm looking at this spreadsheet now while I'm talking to you. And most places are utilizing parking spots for other things. I mean, I personally, on a personal note, not in my hat as the community liaison for the county executive, we have that lot at the end, of Cedar Street, and all the business owners would just be able to park there. And I don't think charging people who've been out of business for the last 3 months a fee, and like Scott said, for him, it's not a big deal, but I'm dealing with business owners all over the county. And we're not going to come out of this for a long time. This is really going to be a very strong economic downturn. We have almost 15% unemployment in the county at this point.
Right, but it sounds like only one community is doing it for free.
No, I'm saying there's nobody that's charging anything. I haven't heard of any other community.
I mean, for the parklet, like we're doing, like you say.
No, I haven't. We're the only ones.
No, but is any other, so you're saying every community that has the parklets is doing it for free?
Yes.
And can you tell me what those
Who are they?
are? Sorry. Now, if you could just email me, right, maybe the listing of communities that have parklets. Because
okay.
The only one that we're aware of is Larchmont, and we reached out to them. So if there's any other communities, I'd be interested.
A lot of them have been meeting in the last week or so to decide, what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. But even in Hartsdale, they're looking at like taking public parking to remove some of the spaces and give them over to seating areas for things. Yes.
Mayor, 99 Cedar is free, by the way.
Right. So the parking,
so it is free.
Free, the parking lot. But what I'm looking at specifically is the parklet, right in front of restaurants, taking up parking spots.
Some of them, what they've done is give those spots over to the restaurants so they can use them for pickup and delivery, or they could use them for table space.
Right, because I'm interested in the table space because it is a big expense. But if other communities are doing it, I am interested to see how they.
Mayor, some of the communities are offering it, but the barriers would be paid by the restaurant. They would do it on their own.
Exactly.
But Larchmont, Larchmont.
I'm not saying Larchmont. I'm saying that other communities, Shari, are talking about it, but some are talking about it that they just give them the space and then they can, do what they want with it, either or.
Yeah, thank you, Charlene, because I know that you have done your homework on that, and I know that you've been speaking with other communities. So I was shocked to hear all of this because I know that you've been speaking with other villages and other towns.
Yeah, and 99 Cedar has always been a possibility, but not a probability because of lack of, because it's not really near any place, but it has not been, we have not been charging for that. We're not charging for the Village Hall parking lot. So we've done all that already.
Okay, is anybody else whose hand is up?
Yes, I'm gonna put Chris on.
My question before you move on the Larchmont thing is whether they own those barriers, because they're cement barriers. So whether they had to incur a cost for that, because if it was something the village already owned, I mean, giving it to restaurants for free is something different. But if we're talking about 2 spots at $5,500 and 9 restaurants or other businesses decide to use those, we're talking about over 50 grand for the village to implement those parklets. And, you know, I'm sure at some point someone's going to talk about, you know, the loss that the village has taken in the hotel tax and the sales tax and other income we have. So
Exactly.
the village or the
Exactly.
board doesn't want to be as accommodating to all the businesses, not just restaurants, all the businesses in the entire village, not just the downtown either, but there are financial considerations and other things that have to weigh in. And I think the board as a whole is willing to do things at a loss. No one's looking to make money or even necessarily break even, but $50,000 plus is a big expense right now when we're not even sure what we'll get back from FEMA.
And Nicole, you're really quite right. We don't know because Elisa has called and hasn't received a response. They may have been donated by a contractor.
Yeah, I just don't want to play the comparison game.
Right,
It's great to look at what other
exactly
people are doing and have
Thank you.
ideas but what works in other communities is a good guide, but doesn't necessarily work here. Like I know in Mount Kisco, their restaurants abut to parking lots. It's much easier to get parking lot space than street space because you don't have to worry as much about the cars coming in. Like I know Half Moon closed their parking lot. I'm sure the people at Rivertown Square are doing things in their parking lots. Our downtown's just not designed to offer those solutions. So we're trying to be creative with other solutions.
And,
Okay,
at the same time, we're also looking out for the other residents to provide them some type of outdoor experience and giving them something in addition to do that will allow them to be outdoors safely. So it's not only about the business owners, it's also about the rest of the whole entire community.
So I'm just looking at Sherry Asher just posted a statement that the barriers in Larchmont were paid for by a not-profit. When you talk about $50,000 out of the village's budget, something gets cut then. You know what I mean?
Right.
So if you lose 50,000 coming in, something going out has to be cut.
But I would also point out that if we close the streets once a week for 2 months, that's also $48,000. So
yes, that's true.
And that was never going to have a fee, with it. That was something to think about that we weren't even going to charge for. So if there is an either or here, to consider that we're talking about like 2 months of 1 week things at $48K that we were never going to charge for, or parklets, and having some sort of small rental fee, then that's something to consider.
See,
we also
what's the idea of asking not-for-profits to help contribute?
Oh, we have some of those in class.
Yeah, Christine, there is another issue. It's not a straight 48,000 because we lose those parking spaces and the revenue from those parking for the whole 4 months. So it's
right. So there's the multiplier of the lot, the amount each spot could make that we're not including in that 50.
Right.
We also
Just
have to remember that we need to work for all the businesses, not just the restaurants. So that's what kind of concerns me a little about the parklets. And the fact that, I mean, we're taking away, we have to figure out how many parking spaces can be taken away. 99 Cedar has always been open. It has always been open to employees of the downtown if they paid that 1 year, the 100 something for the year. So 99 Cedar has always been available to store owners and to employees. It has not been used by them. So if we do something like the parklets, we would have to make sure that none of those people park on the street, because we do have residents who use those streets for parking. We have people who live in the downtown. We have businesses that need spaces for their customers to come to pick stuff up. So we really have to be cognizant. It's not just the beauty thing, it's also the practicality of how can we handle the parking efficiently so that it works for the most people as well.
Okay, so we have about 15 minutes and I just want to, I think there's a few people who have their hands up. So then I think we'll take 3 more and then we'll wrap it up at 5:30. So then we're going to go into advice of counsel after this meeting. So
I do have Chris Vergara on here. He just has to unmute himself.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I just wanted to echo what Dave and Kathy and Piccola had to say about the.
Chris, can you tell us where you're from? And
I'm sorry, I'm from Harper's.
Okay.
I mean, I think to go, I mean, $21 a day, whatever it is, and again, I don't know how that math is done, but to go after restaurants, and I think the idea that we're all treading water is a really generous characterization of what's been happening to restaurants right now. And I think to take $7,500 out of a struggling business's cash flow and basically rolling the dice on the weather it just doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense from a big picture standpoint, as far as, you know, keeping the downtown, you know, in the state that we've kind of been accustomed to. I agree with Melissa, and I think her recommendations are great. I think the parklets are better than closing down the streets, and that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, and now I'm going to put Michelle on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll try to keep this as short as possible. I'll quickly say that I echo the idea that parklets, you know, is our vote. I'm sorry, I'm from Harper's, but a lot of you know me as the Vice President of the Rivertowns Chamber. I want to just make a couple points that haven't been made yet. I serve on the board for the Westchester Restaurant Association. I also was a part of the downtown committee that did a lot of research on pre-COVID, you know, what would it take to revitalize the downtown? And more recently, our restaurants have engaged in a fundraiser to feed people in need, especially the Dobbs Ferry Food Pantry. So I just want to impress upon everybody perspective and the big picture here. I've spent the last few months researching a lot about the importance of these businesses, not from a standpoint of making money, but their place in the economy and helping people that need it most. The first point I want to make is that, you know, when you talk about businesses closing and not paying rent, especially at this time when it's going to be very hard to open a new business. It's not something that people are going to be making an investment in right now. What you are talking about is landlords carrying empty spaces for a long period of time. You know, then are looking at foreclosures. Then you're looking at, you know, people who are still paying rent, those property owners grieving assessments because property values are going down. So from that perspective, you want these businesses to keep paying rent. You want them to stay open, because if a lot of them close, it's going to have a much larger effect than this 50,000 or whatever we're talking about right now. The next thing that I want to point out is that, you know, as part of the Restaurant Association, we went to Albany, we talked to Andrea Stewart-Cousins and a number of other legislators. And Albany, I can tell you, echoes the sentiment, and we learned this as part of the Downtown Improvement Committee, that restaurants are very much anchoring and are the future of our villages. They, you know, occupy large spaces, they pay a lot of rent. They, by nature, have to employ a lot of people. They have a high cost of goods. So as far as stimulating our economy and keeping it running, it's important to keep the restaurants opening and running. Just in a general stance. I can tell you from my research with On the Line, I worked very closely with the executive director of the Westchester Community Foundation to try and build a proposal for funding for the project so that we could continue to feed people who are at risk. And what I learned from that was that, you know, we know this in the restaurants, that we're the largest employer of at-risk populations. And what's happening in Westchester in regards to food need is exponential, and all of the nonprofits who are tackling this see it as exponential for a long period of time. So if you have businesses like restaurants closing, those food lines are going to grow. And again, like I said, the effects of this is going to be exponential. So I just really wanted to impress upon everyone to get the perspective on what we're really facing here. And I understand it's an investment, you know, but we are asking the village to make an investment in the community and to really trust that this is probably the most cost-effective way to tackle it. Businesses closing, people out of work is not the cost-effective way to tackle it. I also want to point out that nonprofits and government agencies have much more readily access to grants, to federal grants that might be coming. Businesses that are for-profit do not. We're getting loans. The PPP is a Band-Aid that is short-term, where, you know, small businesses aren't in a position to be taking out more debt. So, you know, when you talk about recouping the cost of this, block grants, can you recoup the cost of this in block grants in the future? That's something to consider. You know, these are really just not like normal times. And I really want to impress upon you that please look at the long-term big picture of this and consider all of that as instead of the short term. Is there a way you could recoup the cost of the parklets in the future? Is this something we like to do downtown in the summer when business is slow, when the economy is better? Is there a fee that you could charge that could help recoup costs at that point? That's about it. I want to say one more thing about parking. I think that if we're taking the parklets, if we're doing the parklets, we're taking away, you know, obviously streets, spots for retail. And I think that event signage that says free parking, that, you know, kind of takes drivers every step of the way to that Cedar lot is necessary to make people coming into town, you know, find parking and stay in town instead of just kind of give up and get frustrated. So make it as easy as possible for retail people, for the retail businesses to get customers as well. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have two people left who are raising their hands, if that's correct, Jen.
Yes, we have Kathy and Melissa.
We have 8 minutes, so I would like both of you to, at least you can speak, but please limit your comments to less than 3 minutes.
Oh, Kathy just put her hand down, so we only have Melissa.
Okay, so you still have 3 minutes, Melissa. Don't take Kathy.
Okay, no. I just wanted to close up just on the retail side and let everyone know that I did talk to so many different types of businesses and just tried to get a feel for the non-restaurants. And I think just from a non-restaurant perspective, that our biggest concern is shutting the street down. Our biggest concern is taking access away from the village, which I truly believe affects all businesses. And as far as my business goes, you know, being one of the largest retailers, you know, in the village, probably besides Readers, we fully support the parklets. We think it's a brilliant idea. We think it's the best way to actually truly stimulate traffic into the downtown area without doing any harm for other businesses. And if we can find a balanced way to address the parking, which I think there are some really straightforward and easy solutions to do that, I think everyone benefits from it. And I just want to say, as a retailer, I myself personally don't really need the village's help right now. As much as there's been talk about, you know, people feeling safe outside, myself and all the other retail businesses that I know are not experiencing that. We're experiencing our customers wanting to come back into our spaces and wanting to have that connection. And retail and other types of businesses like salons and that, we can't function outside of our spaces. So we're preparing to figure out how to do that. And I really, truly believe that the restaurants need the focus right now. And I think the parklets truly are the way to go forward with that.
Okay, I appreciate everyone's comments. We have a lot to think about.
I think there's two more people, Vinny, that raised their hand.
Well,
Yeah, Steve Tilley and Scott Broccoli.
I think I said there was only going to be one more person speaking.
It's up to you guys.
Steve hasn't spoken, let Steve speak.
Steve, can you hear us?
Yeah. Hi, Steve Tilley from 22 Elm Street on the aqueduct, about to order dinner from Harper's. I would just say amen to my colleague from Harper's. And I have $1,000 to put towards whatever as a donation to make this kind of stuff happen, because we need to bring back the downtown. And it really is a moment where it's either do or die. So thank you so much for considering all this. And the trial was, I saw everybody, a lot of friends out at the trial. And while I am concerned about social distancing and masks, especially in some businesses downtown that I think we need to address, but I think the larger thing is to keep everybody busy and support downtown. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Steve. All right, Scott.
Vinny,
you
can I
have-
just, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Nicole.
No, I just wanted to make one point because there was a lot of talk about the 99 Cedar lot, and this has come up a lot before COVID too. And I would encourage the business owners who are willing to do it now in exchange for parklets to have the business owners and their employees use 99 Cedar all year round, so that the residents and consumers and customers have access to the street spots. So I just wanted to make that public announcement.
Okay, Scott, you got like a minute.
Won't even take that long, Mayor. I just wanted to say, and this might be a very, very tall order, but whatever is decided, time is really of the essence. Whatever's decided one way or the other, I'm going to live with it, go forward. But making a decision as soon as humanly possible would be advantageous to everybody considered. Thanks again, everybody.
I appreciate that. That's good.
Yeah, that's why we did this meeting so fast, which was a pain, I know, but we pulled it together really fast so that we could try and get this done as fast as possible.
I mean, we're doing this in addition to our real jobs, right?
Some businesses.
Yes, I wish somebody was subsidizing my job.
Right? Yeah. We took our jobs to do this at 4 o'clock. So, let's put that in perspective. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to end this meeting. I need a motion to end it. Then we're going to adjourn it to advice of council, and then we'll go from there. So is there a motion? Trustee Taylor, second. Trustee DeRozzi, all in favor. The meeting is over. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.